What would you do if the moment everyone thought you were about to fall to your death, the only creature who came for you wasn't human at all? High on the sacred cliffs of Eagle's Spine, a young native woman was found hanging upside down over a 1,000-foot drop, bruised, terrified, and moments from letting go. No rope team, no rescuers, no hope. At least, that's what everyone believed. Until the ground began to shake and something massive stepped out of the fog. What happened next shocked an entire state and turned a local legend into living truth. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. Now let me take you into the full story. Eagle's Spine had always been more than a mountain. To the people of Silver Hollow, it was a living spirit, an ancient sentinel rising above the mist, shaped by storms and seasons, and the memory of generations. Every morning, the first rays of sunlight spilled across its ridgeline like fire on steel, illuminating the valley below, where the tribe had lived for hundreds of years. And woven through every story, every ceremony, every carving etched into the cedar poles, well, there was one name whispered with reverence: Thunder Ash. Legend said the great ash-colored horse appeared only when the land itself was in danger. A giant among horses, taller than any stallion ever captured or tamed, with hooves that shook the ground and eyes that glowed faintly in the fog. Some said it was the spirit of an ancient protector. Others believed it was the embodiment of Eagle's Spine, its pulse, its warning, its voice. And only those chosen by the mountain could ever glimpse it. Ayanna Redhawk had grown up hearing her grandmother tell the old stories by the fire. She had always listened politely, but as she grew older, she filed them away under cultural mysteries, beautiful but symbolic. Still, whenever she hiked Eagle's Spine alone at dawn, she sometimes felt the mountain breathing beneath her feet. She sometimes felt watched, not in fear, but in recognition, as if something unseen acknowledged her presence. Yet in recent weeks, the mountain no longer felt calm. It began with a tremor, small, subtle, like the mountain groaning in its sleep. Ayanna noticed it during one of her morning walks, a faint vibration under the moss-covered stones. Then came another, and another. By the end of the week, the tremors became strong enough to rattle loose dirt from the cliffside trails. Along with the tremors came sounds dull, rhythmic, metallic. Clang, grind, thud. At first, Ayanna thought they might be echoes from distant construction carried by the cold air. But no construction had been approved anywhere near the restricted zones. And the sounds were too regular, too deep. They came from the belly of the mountain itself. One night, as she stood outside her home, sharpening a fishing spear, a low explosion rolled across the valley, sharp enough to startle the ravens from the trees. The next morning, she found the stream behind the village tinted slightly green. It smelled faintly of chemicals, not quite rotten, not quite metallic, but wrong. The elders murmured among themselves. They had seen this before long ago when miners illegally carved tunnels into ancestral land. Ayanna didn't want to jump to conclusions, but she had a sinking feeling the mountain was trying to tell her something. So she climbed. The air grew colder as she ascended the old hunting trail towards Eagle's Spine. A thin veil of fog clung to the trees, and the sound of wind carried strange rhythms, thuds, scrapes, and the unmistakable whir of industrial machines. As she neared a narrow pass, she crouched behind a fallen log and peered into the heart of the ridge. What she saw stole her breath. Inside a natural crevice where the rock opened into a half-hidden basin stood massive drilling rigs, 3 of them anchored to the mountain with steel plates. Their drill heads spun, boring into the rock with slow, violent rhythm. Thick hoses snaked across the ground toward large chemical drums, unlabeled and leaking. Strange milky fluid dripped into the soil, carving pale streaks into the earth before seeping into the nearby stream. She knew immediately what this was illegal deep core extraction, and it was nowhere near the boundaries approved by the state. Her pulse quickened. She pulled out her phone and began filming, panning slowly across the machines, zooming in on serial numbers, capturing the exact location with GPS. Then she scanned the area for supporting evidence: tire tracks from heavy trucks, fresh saw cuts on young trees, patches of soil unnaturally hot, and cracks in the rock that hadn't been there last season. Inside a small operations tent, she found something even more damning: a map. Not just any map, a projected expansion plan. Red marker lines showed drilling zones extending deep into protected territory. Blue arrows indicated future water diversion routes. Ayanna snapped photos of every inch. Her hands trembled when she overheard voices approaching. "Need to keep pushing east. Boss says we don't stop unless someone from the tribe starts poking around." "What if they do?" "Well," the man chuckled darkly, "then we make sure they don't poke again. Orders are orders." Ayanna's stomach knotted. She stayed perfectly still until they walked past, then slipped away through the brush, recording their conversation from a distance. By late afternoon, she had filled her pockets with samples: water vials sealed in glass tubes, soil and leaf fragments zipped into bags, images of chemical burns on tree bark. She hiked down the mountain with aching legs, but a burning purpose. When she reached the sheriff's substation in town, she marched straight to Deputy Rowan Hale's desk. "We need to talk," she said, placing the evidence on the table. Rowan eyed the pile. "What am I looking at? Illegal drilling, chemical leaks, boundary violations, and threats." She showed him the videos and audio recordings. Rowan leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Ayanna, this is serious. Dangerous, serious. That's why I'm here." He rubbed his temples. "I'll review everything. But you know Graves has influence. My hands aren't as free as you think. Then I'll make sure the truth doesn't depend on you alone." Ayanna left copies of her data on his desk, then walked out. Her next stop was a journalist friend, someone who had covered environmental scandals before. She emailed him the files. Then she made 2 backup drives. One she kept around her neck, the other she hid under a loose floorboard in her house. She didn't realize the storm she had just awakened. Colton Graves, the wealthy, smooth-talking owner of the drilling company, received word the next morning that someone from the tribe had been snooping. He didn't know who, not yet, but he intended to find out. And fast. That night, a black SUV crawled into the village, idling near Ayanna's home, long after midnight. Its tinted windows reflected the moonlight, like the eyes of a wolf. She pretended not to notice. But when she stepped outside the next morning, she found fresh footprints beneath her window, large, heavy, and intentionally left where she'd see them. 2 unfamiliar men appeared at the market the following day. They asked about her, where she lived, who she spent time with, whether she ever went hiking alone. Their tone made the elders uneasy. When Ayanna returned home that evening, she paused at her doorstep. Something was wrong. The air felt charged, heavy. And then, crash, a fist-sized rock smashed through her window, scattering glass across the floor. She ducked behind the table, heart pounding. A message buzzed onto her phone seconds later. "Stop now, or you won't see dawn." She forced herself not to shake. Fear was exactly what they wanted. But anger burned hotter. The village reacted quickly. The elders whispered prayers and cautioned her to stay quiet. Parents forbade their children from playing near her house, afraid of what might happen. The same SUV appeared again, headlights trained on her front door for nearly an hour before driving off. And still, Ayanna refused to back down. Word spread quickly. Some villagers supported her, praising her courage. But others, those promised jobs and money, turned cold. "She's exaggerating," someone muttered at the trading post. "She's ruining our chance at a better future," another said. Within days, Graves launched a full-throttle propaganda campaign. Flyers appeared around town claiming Ayanna was fabricating allegations for personal gain. His spokespeople visited households promising prosperity and painting her as a troublemaker standing in the way of progress. A town hall meeting was called. The room buzzed with tension as Ayanna presented her evidence. Photos of leaking drums, videos of drills operating at midnight, the audio clip of men discussing shutting up anyone who interfered. Before she could finish, a man stood and scoffed loudly. "Emotion is not evidence," he said, quoting Graves, almost word for word. The room erupted into shouting. Those who believed her argued with those desperate for economic relief. Rowan Hale watched anxiously from the back, clearly torn between duty and pressure. In the end, no resolution came, only division, fear, a growing sense that Ayanna had stepped into a battlefield with no allies strong enough to shield her. As she walked home under the cold glow of the moon, she felt the weight of the mountain pressing on her shoulders. The land was hurting, the truth was being buried, and she was standing alone at the fault line of something much larger than she had imagined. Can Ayanna really stand against an entire empire of power and greed? Or will they finally crush her? What do you think will happen when the mountain chooses its side? Tell us your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe before we dive into the most exciting part of the story. The night after the town hall meeting, Ayanna barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the drills again, those deep, grinding booms echoing through the bones of Eagle's spine. The mountain felt wounded, hurt, crying out. And despite the danger, despite the menacing SUV parked near her house, despite the warnings whispered by the elders, she knew she had to go back. At dawn, she packed lightly but purposefully a small handheld camera, a thermos of river water, sterile vials for soil and water samples, a rugged notebook, and a folded topographical map. She slung the bag across her shoulder and started the long ascent. Frost glazed the grass. The air tasted sharp with early winter. And beneath her boots, she felt it again, the faint hum, the tremor, rippling through the rock. They're drilling again, she thought. By the time she reached the narrow ridge leading toward the hidden basin, the sound had grown louder, no longer distant, but pulsing through the trees like a mechanical heartbeat. She rounded a bend and froze. A new pipeline had appeared overnight, thick metallic snaking from the drilling site toward a lower ravine. A stream of murky gray wastewater spilled from the end, cascading directly into a crack between the rocks. The stench burned the inside of her nose. She lifted her camera, immediately capturing every angle of the slope, the discharge, the way the water turned pale as it seeped downward. "This is it," she whispered. "This is the final proof." She stepped closer to get a better shot of the discharge valve, and that was when she heard it. A twig snapped behind her, not the light pop of a deer or fox, a heavy crack. She spun around and her stomach dropped. Two men stood on the trail blocking both possible exits. She recognized them instantly. Mace Turner, broad-shouldered and stone-faced, and Rylan Cole, wiry, quick with the eyes of someone always looking for a fight. Graves's most loyal dogs. Well, Mace drawled, stepping forward, and look what we found. Ayanna backed up instinctively. Rylan smirked as he approached from the other side, cutting off her path. "Let's see what you've been filming," he said. Before she could react, Mace lunged and ripped the camera out of her hand. Rylan grabbed her arms, pinning them behind her back. "Let go," she cried, struggling. But Rylan tightened his grip until pain shot through her shoulders. Mace powered on the camera. The screen lit up with footage of the drilling rigs, the leaking pipes, the map, and her whispered commentary. His expression darkened. You recorded everything." Rylan leaned in. "Boss said if anyone gets close, we clean it up." "Clean up," Ayanna repeated, breathless. "This is my home. You can't—" But they weren't listening. Mace tossed the camera into his palm like a rock. "You went too far, girl." Rylan pulled a coil of climbing rope from his pack. "No one's gonna believe she came up here alone," he said almost casually. Fear spiked through Ayanna's chest. "Don't do this. If you hurt me, everyone will know." "Nah," Mace muttered, stepping closer. "When they find you at the bottom of the ravine, they'll think you slipped. Happens all the time. These cliffs are tricky." Rylan stuffed a cloth into her mouth to muffle her voice. She tried to scream, but it came out as a choked sound. They dragged her toward the western edge of the ridge, a place where the soil had been destabilized by days of drilling. Cracks webbed across the ground like dry lightning. The wind howled through the pine needles as they forced her to the brink. Mace tied her wrists together with the rope, then secured the other end to a thick, gnarled pine whose roots twisted deep into the mountain. "Make it quick," Rylan said nervously. "Soil's shifting." Mace didn't wait. He shoved Ayanna backward. For a single breath, she felt weightless. Then the world inverted. The rope jerked violently as her body swung downward. She dangled upside down, the blood rushing instantly to her face. Her hair whipped in the wind, brushing against the gaping nothingness below. The ravine plunged hundreds of feet, cold, merciless. Her phone slipped from her pocket, hit a rock, and spiraled into the abyss. Her notebook followed. Above her, Mace stared down his silhouette framed against the gray sky. He lifted her camera, glanced at it with disdain, and hurled it off the cliff. "Now it's clean," he said. Rylan shifted uneasily. "We should go. The ground's about to give." When they find her, Mace said it'll look like a climbing accident. The men turned and walked away, vanishing into the pine trees, until the forest swallowed their footsteps. And Ayanna was alone. Completely, horribly alone. Her breath came in short, panicked bursts. The rope cut into her wrists. The cloth gag pressed painfully against her teeth. Her head throbbed from the blood pooling downward. Wind slammed into her dangling body, twisting her violently. Each swing rubbed the rope against the jagged edge of the cliff. She whimpered behind the gag. "I can't breathe. I can't. Help me. Someone." A small stone dislodged above her and plummeted past her face. She listened to it fall 1 second, 2 seconds, 4. Then nothing. She squeezed her eyes shut. "This is it," she thought. "I'm going to die here." Tears gathered in her upside-down eyes and streamed up into her hairline. Time lost meaning. Minutes blurred. Her body grew numb. Her thoughts scattered like leaves in wind. Then, thump. A deep vibration shuddered through the rock. Her eyes snapped open. Another vibration. Thump. Thump. Heavier than footsteps. More rhythmic than tremors. Her heart seized. They came back to finish me. She twisted her neck, wincing as pain shot through her shoulders. All she could see was a shape, massive, dark, moving through the fog above her. "Stay away," she cried through the gag voice, muffled. "Please go." The shadow stepped closer, and the fog parted around it. It wasn't the men. It was a horse. No, a giant horse. Nearly twice the size of any stallion she had ever seen, its coat, the storm-gray color of wet ash mane, wild and wind-tangled hooves broad enough to crack boulders. Its breath puffed in thick clouds drifting down toward her. It was Thunder Ash, the spirit of the mountain, the legend she had refused to believe, and it was standing right above her. "No. No, go," she begged, her voice trembling. "You'll break the cliff. You'll fall too. Please go." The stallion didn't move away. It simply stared down at her ears, pricked forward nostrils flaring, as if reading her fear. The ground beneath its hooves shifted slightly. A small ridge crumbled into dust, but it did not retreat. Instead, it took a slow, careful step sideways, testing the earth rather than forcing it. The caution in its movements was unmistakable. Ayanna's chest tightened. It understands. Then the rope jerked suddenly. A sharp crack split the air as the soil supporting the pine root gave way by an inch. Her body dropped half a foot before the rope caught again. "Ah!" she screamed through the gag, clenching her fists until her knuckles burned. Tears poured upward toward her scalp. Her hands were slipping. Her vision swirled. She sobbed helplessly. I can't hold on." Thunder Ash's demeanor changed instantly. It lowered its head, scanning the cliff edge. Then it pivoted its hindquarters and delivered a powerful kick into a jagged rock formation near the wire-thin edge of the cliff. The stone cracked, splintering into a chunk that dropped clear of the rope. The rope, no longer sawing against sharp stone, loosened just enough to stop fraying. Then, astonishingly, the massive stallion knelt. First one leg, then the other, lowering its colossal body as close as possible to the cliffside. Necks of wild horses rarely descended so low. Predators could take advantage of such vulnerability. But Thunder Ash lowered himself anyway, slow, deliberate, fearless. With a soft grunt, he extended his neck downward and swung his thick mane toward her bound hands. It was unmistakable. He wanted her to grab him. Ayanna stared up at him, stunned. His eyes, dark, steady, held no fear, only an unspoken command. "Trust me." Her arms trembled violently. She couldn't feel her fingers. The rope burned her wrists. And if she let go, even for a second, she could fall. But she had no choice. The cliff was crumbling piece by piece. Her strength was fading. "I can't," she whispered. A small section of soil collapsed, sending dust into her face. She felt the rope shift again, the knot tightening painfully against her skin. This was her last chance. She took one trembling breath, unclenched her right hand from the rope, and lunged upward. Her fingers grazed the stallion's mane. They slipped. She tried again, reaching with every last ounce of strength. This time her hand closed around a thick tangle of coarse hair. Thunder Ash immediately raised his head, pulling her upward with immense strength. Her body swung hard toward the cliff face. She pushed off the rock with her boot, using the leverage to reach higher. The stallion shifted his weight, angling his body to counterbalance her ascent. Muscles rippled beneath his coat like sculpted iron. With a desperate grunt, she hooked her forearm across his neck and pulled herself onto his broad back. The moment her weight settled the ledge where she had dangled, finally gave out stone and dirt, collapsing into the abyss with a roar. Thunder Ash surged backward, leaping away from the disintegrating cliff and landing firmly on stable ground. Ayanna clung to him, gasping, the wind knocked out of her. Her heart hammered like a trapped bird. For several long seconds, the stallion didn't move. He simply stood, chest heaving, letting her breathe, letting her realize she was alive. When she finally loosened her grip enough to lift her head, he turned slightly, one dark eye studying her with almost human gentleness. She whispered, voice breaking, "Thank you. Thank you." Thunder Ash didn't respond, of course, but the way he shifted his stance, positioning himself to protect her from the wind, felt like an answer. He began walking, not roughly, not hurriedly, but with a measured pace, carrying her away from the cliff into the safety of the forest. Ayanna buried her face against his neck. She was shaking uncontrollably. She never noticed the camera pointed up from far below. In the valley, a teenage boy tracking a pair of golden eagles had accidentally swung his camcorder toward the ridge. What he recorded would soon shock the entire state: the dangling woman, the collapse of the cliff, and the enormous, ash-colored horse, lifting her from death, with a precision no wild creature should possess. The legend of Thunder Ash, once whispered, doubted, and dismissed, was now captured on film. And Ayanna Redhawk, still trembling and clinging to the stallion's mane, had no idea the world was about to change. The world found out before Ayanna even understood what had happened. She had barely made it home after the rescue, half-conscious, bruised, trembling, when her phone began buzzing non-stop with notifications. She ignored them at first, thinking they were more threats or unknown numbers. But when she finally tapped one open, her breath caught. A shaky video filled the screen. A woman heard dangling upside down over a jagged cliff. A rope fraying. A scream swallowed by the wind. And then rising from the mist like a creature forged from stormlight thunder ash. The giant horse braced himself, shattered rock knelt on trembling ground, and lifted her to safety in an act so impossibly precise it looked scripted by something beyond human. The caption read, "Giant horse saves native woman from certain death." And the view counter spun like a slot machine. 35,000 views, 118,000, 300,000. By midnight, it hit 3 million. Comments exploded. "Is this real Thunder Ash? Is a guardian spirit? My grandma used to tell stories. This looks like CGI, but the physics, holy crap. Whoever that woman is, she needs protection now. Forget the horse. Why was she up there in the first place?" When local news stations picked it up, the story went from oddity to statewide shockwave. Reporters flocked to Eagle's Spine, trying to replicate the camera angle. In doing so, they accidentally captured the polluted water running through the ravine, the felled trees, the scar in the earth, where the drilling rigs were hidden. Suddenly, there wasn't just one story. There were two, and both were explosive. The miracle rescue by a mythical horse, and the brutal reality of environmental devastation. The public reaction was immediate and furious. One news segment replayed the leaked video of chemical sludge trickling into the stream. Another showed dead patches of forest. Environmental groups began releasing statements calling for an emergency investigation. Protests formed outside the state capitol demanding answers. And the biggest question repeated across every broadcast, every comment section, every interview. What was she doing up there? What did she uncover? Ayanna's name surfaced quickly after reporters matched her face from the rescue footage with tribal records. By the next morning, vans with satellite dishes parked near Silver Hollow. Every journalist wanted the same story. Every one of them wanted her. And Colton Graves felt the pressure more than anyone. His company's inbox flooded with reporters demanding statements. Shareholders called in panic. News anchors questioned the legitimacy of his drilling permits. His PR team tried to spin the incident, but the footage of the polluted stream overshadowed every excuse. Graves finally appeared on a local broadcast, jaw-tight smile, heavy and forced. "These online videos," he said, "are being taken out of context. We have no involvement in any illegal drilling. We prioritize safety and environmental compliance." But even as he spoke, the viral rescue video was replaying on the split screen beside him. Every raised eyebrow, every stiff gesture, every defensive stutter made him look guiltier. By the end of that day, his company's stock value dropped nearly 7%. He needed a scapegoat. Or better yet, he needed silence. So Graves reached out to Ayanna. He invited her to his temporary office in town, a white-walled corporate space that looked painfully out of place beside the rustic buildings. His secretary greeted her with 2 bright eyes and 2 stiff posture, then ushered her into a conference room. Graves entered moments later, wearing an immaculate suit and a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Ayanna Redhawk, he said, extending a hand. "I'm glad you agreed to meet. You've had quite a week." She didn't shake his hand. "What do you want?" she asked. Graves clicked open a leather folder and slid a contract toward her. Non-disclosure agreement. Settlement offer. No admission of wrongdoing. He spoke softly, almost soothingly. "You're a brave young woman, but bravery can turn reckless, especially when you're standing alone. You've already been through enough danger, haven't you?" Her eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening me?" "Of course not," he replied with feigned innocence. "I'm offering protection, compensation. Your family could benefit. You could put all this behind you." "And in exchange," she said quietly, "I stay quiet." He offered a cold smile. "Everyone wins." Ayanna stared him down for a full, unblinking 10 seconds. Then she pushed the contract back toward him. "I don't sell the land that raised me," she said. "And I don't betray Eagle Spine for a check." The false warmth drained from Graves' expression. His smile hardened like plaster cracking. "You'll regret this," he muttered. He tore the contract in half and dropped the scraps into a waste bin. That night, a scream ripped through the quiet of Silver Hollow. Ayanna bolted from her house to see flames erupting behind her home, her storage shed engulfed in a roaring inferno. She ran forward, but heat forced her back. Sparks flew toward the trees. The fire licked at the night sky with a hunger that felt personal. Her notebooks, her soil samples, her printed photos. Everything inside was being devoured. Firefighters arrived minutes later, but it was too late. In the smoking ruins, Ayanna recognized the charred outline of her evidence containers. "Someone did this on purpose," she whispered. She felt the world tilt beneath her feet. But they didn't know about one thing, her backup stored with reporters. While Graves celebrated the destruction of her shed, her files were already being analyzed in newsrooms across the region. So Graves escalated. His company filed a lawsuit accusing her of defamation and inflicting major financial damage by making false claims. They demanded $5 million in compensation, an impossible sum for anyone in Silver Hollow. The lawsuit tore the community apart. Some villagers, terrified of economic collapse, muttered that Ayanna had gone too far. Others feared Graves would scrap the entire drilling deal if pushed. Arguments erupted at the general store in the school parking lot, even during tribal council meetings. Ayanna defended herself with exhaustion in her voice. "I'm not trying to take anyone's future," she insisted. "But there won't be a future if Eagle Spine collapses." Many agreed, but many others looked away. Alone, cornered and smeared by the corporation's PR machine, she turned to the only thing she had left: the truth. She emailed the original files, high-resolution photos, videos from her backup device, voice recordings of Mace and Rylan, to 3 major newspapers. One responded immediately. A week later, a headline screamed across the front page: "Native woman provides proof of illegal drilling at sacred land." Suddenly, the lawsuit seemed desperate. Suddenly, the public pressure multiplied. Suddenly, Graves had a new problem. Deputy Rowan Hale showed up at Ayanna's door. He arrived late, long after the village had fallen asleep, holding a small USB drive in his trembling hand. "I shouldn't be here," he murmured. "If they find out," Ayanna asked. Rowan swallowed. Graves's people, the county board, half the investors. He pressed the USB into her palm. Inside were documents no one outside the corporation should have had access to, emails proving the drilling extended beyond approved boundaries. Internal memos warning that seismic instability was imminent. Maps edited before being submitted to the state. Financial reports showing hush money payouts. And one chilling note from Graves himself: environmental checks unnecessary. "Proceed quietly." Ayanna stared at the files, her heart pounding. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Rowan sighed. "Because I'm tired of watching this town bow to power. And because I owe your father a debt from many years ago. He saved my life up on that mountain once." His voice cracked. "But listen to me, Ayanna. Graves won't let this stand. He's desperate. Desperate men do stupid things." He was right. The next day, Graves slammed his fist onto a conference table, sending a stack of papers flying. "I want this problem gone," he shouted at Mace and Rylan. "Before the state gets involved, before investigators show up, before that damn horse is turned into a symbol." Mace nodded once, jaw tight. "We can handle her. She should have died on that cliff," Graves snarled. "Make sure the next incident isn't so miraculous." Rylan hesitated. "Sir, things are different now. There's attention. Cameras." Graves leaned forward, eyes blazing. "Then do it quietly, or I'll find someone else who will." Mace clapped Rylan on the shoulder. "Come on, we finish this tonight." From that moment, they stalked her relentlessly. They followed her truck down old forest roads. They parked outside the newspaper office when she met a reporter. They watched from the shadows near the communal lodge. Once at 2 a.m, she glanced outside and saw a silhouette standing motionless near her fence line. A tall silhouette, watching, waiting. For the first time since childhood, she locked her door. Her sleep fractured into shards, short gasps of rest broken by nightmares. Each snap of a twig outside sent her heart racing. Each howl of wind against the siding made her sit upright in bed. Even the elders grew tense, whispering that a great danger hovered over Silver Hollow like a hungry bird. Friends urged her to leave town, stay with relatives, escape until things cooled. But Ayanna shook her head every time. "I don't run from Eagle's Spine," she said. "I protect it." And so she stayed caught between a corporation's wrath, a community divided, and a legend reborn through a grainy viral video. By the time the sun slid toward the jagged line of Eagle's Spine again, Ayanna's nerves felt like frayed wire. Every engine rumble made her flinch. Every unfamiliar shape near the tree line looked like Mace or Rylan. She had spent the day in town answering reporters' questions and dropping off copies of the files Rowan had given her. When she finally turned her pickup toward home along the narrow dirt road, all she wanted was silence. Instead, she got a wall of rusted metal. A beat-up pickup truck sat sideways across the road, blocking the way. The late evening light painted it orange, but there was something predatory in the way it waited, engine idling tailpipe, puffing short bursts of smoke. Ayanna slowed and then stopped completely. Gravel crunched under her tires. There was no way around it. On one side of the road, a steep rock wall. On the other, a drop into a dry ravine. Her heart began to pound. 2 men climbed out. She didn't recognize their faces, but she recognized their type. Rough clothes, heavy boots caps pulled low. One of them had smeared mud across the rear license plate, just enough to blur it from a distance. He strode up to her window and slammed his knuckles against the glass. "Out," he said. Ayanna cracked the window just enough to speak. "You're blocking the road." Out of the truck, he repeated, voice low and flat. She flicked a glance into the rearview mirror. The road behind her was nothing but zigzagging dirt and stone. There was no room to turn around without getting dangerously close to the edge. The man leaned in, his breath sour. "You've cost Mr. Graves a lot of money," he murmured. "You don't get a third chance." Every instinct screamed at her to hit the gas, to ram the truck and hope it moved, but she could see the bulge at the man's waistband and the shape of something metallic under his jacket. Slowly, she shut off the engine and stepped out. The second man approached, carrying a folder. He shoved it toward her. "Sign," he said. She looked down. Legal jargon. Bold print at the top, retraction of accusations and withdrawal of complaint. Her throat tightened. "I'm not signing that." The first man grabbed her wrist, spinning her toward the hood of her truck. A pen was shoved into her fingers, the folder pressed to the metal. "You will," he hissed. "Today." She tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. The other man shifted his jacket just enough for her to see the handgun tucked inside. "We can make this a lot uglier," he said. "Or you can walk away and forget about Eagle's spine. Your choice." Her hands shook. The pen hovered above the paper. Ayanna swallowed hard, then forced herself to speak. "No." The man behind her dug his fingers into her wrist. "What I said no," she repeated louder this time. "I will not sign." Before he could respond, the ground shuddered. Not like a distant tremor, not like a minor quake. This was a pounding, a drumbeat in the earth. Thump, thump, thump. The men paused. One of them glanced toward the trees. What the? From the darkness beneath the pines, something massive detached itself from the shadows. The pickup's headlights spilled across a broad chest, a wild mane and eyes that caught the light with an eerie shine. Thunder Ash stepped onto the road. His hooves struck the dirt with the weight of a falling boulder. Each breath steamed into the cooling air. His head towered above the men, above the hood of the truck, even above the roof of Ayanna's pickup. "That's one of the men," stammered, voice breaking. "That's not real." That thing, Thunder Ash, took another step forward. The dirt road vibrated. A shallow crack spidered out from under his front hoof, creeping toward the older man's boots. The pickup truck rocked slightly, as if shoved by an invisible hand. Back in the truck, the second man blurted, "Now!" They bolted, scrambling over each other, to yank the driver's door open. One of them dropped the legal documents. The wind snatched the papers and scattered them into the ditch. The engine roared, gears ground, and the pickup lurched backward down the slope, fishtailing as it retreated. Ayanna stood frozen, her chest heaving. Thunder Ash didn't chase them. He simply stared after the fleeing truck until its taillights vanished around the bend. Then he turned his head toward Ayanna. For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of her cooling engine and the rush of blood in her ears. "Thank you," she whispered. Thunder Ash flicked an ear. Then, without any dramatics, he stepped off the road, moved between the trees, and disappeared into darkness as if he'd never been there at all. The next day, Graves knew. The failed intimidation, the second miraculous appearance of the giant horse, the drone footage showing something enormous moving through the trees. It all painted one thing clearly. Thunder Ash wasn't just a legend anymore. He was a danger, not to the people, to Graves. The horse had become a symbol, a living accusation. If investigators or reporters ever got close enough, if they ever linked the land's spiritual significance to the illegal drilling, Graves's empire would collapse even faster. "We have to contain this," he snapped in the boardroom, slamming a hand onto the table. "If they turn that animal into some kind of environmental mascot, we're finished." "Contain how?" one of his men asked carefully. Graves's eyes hardened. "Trap it. Sedate it. Own it." Mace and Rylan were called in again. This time they carried heavy steel bear traps, oversized, reinforced, the kind meant for creatures far larger than any black bear. They hiked into the forest with them, digging holes near game trails, smearing bait on metal jaws, covering the cruel teeth with leaves and pine needles. By midday, sections of Eagle's spine had become a hidden minefield of cold iron. But the mountain was not the only one watching. On a routine inspection near the drill scars, Ayanna saw fresh turned soil where there shouldn't have been any. Curious and on edge, she knelt and brushed aside a layer of needles. Her fingers hit steel. She jerked her hand back just in time to avoid the sharpened teeth of a sprung trap. Her blood went cold. "This isn't for deer," she muttered, "or bear." The jaws were too large, the chain too thick. Everything about it screamed, designed for something bigger, designed for thunder ash. Panic surged through her. She tried to disarm the trap, but the spring was too strong. One wrong movement, and it would slam shut on her hand. She backed away, heart racing. Then she cupped her hands to her mouth and shouted into the trees, "Thunder ash! Stay away from here, do you hear me? Stay away!" Her voice echoed down the valley, bouncing off stone and snow and silence. She didn't know if he heard her. Somewhere deeper in the forest, Mace and Rylan were setting another line of traps when they caught a new sound, sharp, rhythmic, closer and closer. Hoofbeats. They looked at each other. "Maybe it worked," Rylan whispered. "Maybe he's coming to the bait." Thunder ash burst through the underbrush like a storm. His eyes blazed with a cold fire. He didn't hesitate, didn't spook, didn't rear. He attacked the traps. With a vicious kick, he smashed the main support of a tripwire that linked several of the steel jaws together. The mechanism snapped. One trap slammed shut harmlessly on air. Another flipped end over end, its chain ripping out of the ground. A third triggered too early, nearly catching Rylan's boot. He jumped back with a strangled yelp. "It's not a horse," he cried. "It's a monster." Mace didn't answer. Fear had hollowed out his face. They ran two armed men fleeing from a creature that refused to be claimed or caged. Their last hope was technology. Graves approved the use of a high-end drone to track the horse and Ayanna from above. Its camera swooped over Eagle's spine, zooming in on clearings, tracing streams, following trails. When it drifted over a narrow eastern gorge, the feed crackled. "Adjust the signal," the operator muttered. "I'm losing it." Static washed across the monitor. For a moment, a blurred shape filled the frame like a silhouette among clouds. Then the screen went white. The drone never transmitted again. Magnetic interference, maybe someone suggested weakly. Graves stared at the dead monitor, jaw clenched. Or maybe a quieter part of him whispered some things simply weren't meant to be seen from above. While he scrambled to regain control, the state made its move. The combination of viral videos, leaked files, and corroborating journalist reports finally forced the Department of Natural Resources to act. They announced a formal emergency investigation into the Eagle Spine operation. Inspection crews arrived with seismographs, spectrometers, and drilling logs. They cordoned off sections of the ridge with bright tape and warning signs. For days, they bored shallow test holes, collected water, and documented every scar in the rock. The findings were damning. Drill paths had clearly breached the legal boundaries. Water samples showed chemical contamination at 300% above allowable limits. Soil erosion patterns matched deep, unapproved core extraction. And the very layer of rock supporting the ridge had been weakened by Graves's machines. New headlines roared to life: Eagle Spine illegally drilled, contaminated. Who is responsible? In Silver Hollow, something shifted. Neighbors who had once looked at Ayanna with suspicion now approached with shame in their eyes. "I'm sorry," one woman told her, pressing a loaf of fresh bread into her hands. "We were afraid of losing jobs. We forgot to be afraid of losing home." The village council gathered under the cedar poles of the longhouse. The fire crackled in the center as the elders spoke. Ayanna stood between this mountain and a man who wanted to hollow it out, the chief said. She believed the stories when some of us had grown tired of telling them. Now it is our turn to stand between her and those who would silence her. People brought lumber to help repair her burned shed. They brought blankets, food, and quiet words of gratitude. Tears burned in her eyes. "I thought I was alone," she admitted. "You were never alone," one elder replied softly. "You just walked ahead of us. We're catching up." The investigation closed in, and Graves felt the walls tightening. Every new report, every subpoena, every news alert hammered home a truth he refused to accept. If Thunder Ash remained free, if the horse became a symbol of resistance in sacred land, his company's reputation would not recover. Investors would flee. Lawsuits would multiply. He wouldn't just lose Eagle's spine, he'd lose everything. Unless he took control of the narrative. Unless he took control of the horse. If we capture it, he told himself, pacing alone in his office, we control the story. We turn it into a conservation mascot. We sponsor its care. We look like heroes. He stared out the window toward the distant outline of the ridge. "If I control that animal," he whispered, "I control them all." Desperation made him reckless. Despite a pending suspension order, he loaded a tranquilizer rifle and a handheld GPS, then drove alone toward the mountain as the sky flushed purple with sunset. The ground trembled faintly under his boots as he hiked the mountain, still echoing the wounds he'd carved into it. He didn't care, not anymore. He was going to bring Thunder Ash down. Word reached Ayanna through hushed calls and a frantic visit from Rowan. "Graves just left the site with a rifle," Rowan said. "Alone? No witnesses? No oversight?" "And where do you think he's going?" she asked. Rowan didn't have to answer. She grabbed her coat and ran. The forest swallowed her quickly, but she knew these paths better than anyone. She recognized Graves's footprints in the soft soil, sharp-edged, expensive soles, and followed them up a narrow trail toward one of the most unstable sections of the ridge, a place where the drilling had bitten deep. She heard him before she saw him, his boots skidding on loose stone, his voice cursing the terrain. "Graves," she shouted. Her echo chased itself across the rocks. "Stop, you're going to bring the whole ridge down." He turned startled near the edge of a sloping outcrop. The rock beneath him gave a warning groan. A fissure widened beneath his weight. The ground crumbled. Graves's feet slipped out from under him. He slid toward the edge, clawing at the soil. At the last second, he caught a thick root jutting from the rock face. His legs dangled over open space. "Help!" he screamed. "Somebody help me!" Ayanna skidded to a halt several yards away. The stone under her boots shifted ominously. She dropped to her knees, reaching out, but the gap between them was too wide. The entire ledge felt like one wrong move from collapse. "Hold on," she called. "Don't move, I can't hold," he shouted back, voice ragged. "Pull me up, I'll fall too," she said. "The rock is hollow, you did this to it." He glared at her, panting. "I'll pay you. I'll drop the charges. Call off the lawyers, just get me up." The mountain answered before she could. Hoofbeats rolled across the ridge. Thunder Ash strode into view, emerging from the mist with the quiet authority of a storm in human form. He stopped between Ayanna and Graves, broad chest facing the void mane whipping in the wind. Graves stared up at him, eyes wide with disbelief and terror. "You," he rasped. "You're the reason this all started." Thunder Ash stepped closer to the edge rock, cracking beneath his weight, yet somehow holding. He lowered his head slightly, looking down at Graves, not with malice, but with a piercing, unreadable stillness. "Please," Graves choked. "Help me. I'll stop the drilling. I'll clean it all up." His words dissolved into sobs. Ayanna placed a hand on Thunder Ash's shoulder, feeling the heat of his muscles, the steady rhythm of his breath. The wind gusted hard, tugging at her hair, pulling at Graves's dangling body. She whispered, almost afraid to hear herself say it, "Spirit of Eagle's spine." This is your land. You decide. For a long suspended heartbeat, it felt as if the entire mountain held its breath. Then voices burst through the trees. "Over here," Rowan shouted. "We've got movement on the ridge." He and 2 investigators appeared hauling ropes and harnesses. Thunder Ash shifted back, making room. Rowan dropped to his stomach, anchored by the others, and tossed a coil down. "Grab it," he yelled. Graves released the root with one hand, clutching the rope instead. Slowly, with grunts and curses and slipping boots, they dragged him up onto solid ground. He collapsed, gasping, face gray with shock. Rowan straightened, panting, and pulled a folded document from his jacket. "Colton Graves," he said, voice ringing over the ridge. "You are under arrest for illegal resource extraction, environmental destruction, intimidation of a witness, and arson." He snapped cold metal cuffs onto Graves's wrists. The man didn't fight. He just stared past Rowan, past Ayanna, toward Thunder Ash, who stood a few yards away, still in silent mane, tossing in the wind like a banner. "You," Graves whispered hoarsely, eyes glazed. "You ruined everything." Thunder Ash snorted once, as if dismissing the idea that one man's greed could ever outweigh a mountain's will. As the investigators led Graves away, Ayanna stood beside the giant horse. The wind roared through the pines, carrying away the last echoes of the struggle. Thunder Ash lowered his head and gently touched his muzzle to her shoulder. A quiet, grounding gesture. Then he turned and walked into the fog. This time, she didn't chase him, because this wasn't just her victory. It belonged to the mountain. In the weeks that followed, consequences fell like steady rain. The state issued an emergency order. All activity on Eagle's Spine was to cease immediately. Drilling rigs went silent. Pumps stopped. Workers dismantled platforms and packed up barrels under strict supervision. Bright orange barriers sprang up around the perimeter, warning away trespassers. News bulletins carried the story across the country. Legendary horse leads to arrest of mining CEO after illegal drilling exposed. Guardian of Eagle's Spine viral rescue video unmasks environmental crimes. Investigators expanded their net, uncovering years of bribery, falsified reports, and hidden accidents. Former employees stepped forward. Paper trails led to off-the-books payoffs. The more they dug, the more rot they found. Graves was transferred to a secure holding facility to await trial. His company tried to salvage its image, but failed. Under the weight of legal fees, fines, and public outrage, they began pulling out of the valley entirely. Heavy trucks rolled away, one after another, carrying sections of dismantled rigs. The illegal roads they'd carved into the hillside were barricaded and scheduled for reclamation. From the edge of Silver Hollow, villagers watched the convoy disappear like a bad dream finally ending. One evening, under a sky streaked with starlight, the community gathered around a great fire. Drums beat softly. Children sat wide-eyed as elders spoke. "Eagle's Spine spared one of our own," the chief said, nodding toward Ayanna. And through her, the truth came out. Now it is our responsibility to spare Eagle's Spine from ever being carved up again. A pledge was drafted and signed. The people of Silver Hollow would oppose any future attempt at commercial exploitation on or around the mountain. They would defend it in court, in the media, and on the ground. The state took notice. Within months, officials designated Eagle's Spine as the Silver Hollow Natural and Cultural Preserve. The status came with strict protections: no mining, no industrial development, no unauthorized construction. Any research would require approval from both the tribe and the state. Environmental agencies archived footage and testimony mentioning Thunder Ash, but no one could find fresh tracks, no one could produce new images. Publicly, scientists called the horse an anomaly, a likely misidentification, or a trick of perspective. Privately, Some admitted they weren't sure what they believed anymore. A few proposed tranquilizing the animal for study if it ever appeared again. The people of Silver Hollow shut that down immediately. "He is not a specimen," the chief said. "He is not yours to tag or cage. He is part of this mountain, and this mountain is under our guardianship." So Thunder Ash remained unrecorded, unmeasured, uncaptured. Free. Rumors persisted. A hunter claimed he'd seen an enormous silhouette watching him from a ridge at dawn. A pair of hikers swore they'd heard hoofbeats echoing across the valley when no horses were anywhere nearby. But he never stepped in front of a camera again. When the legal dust settled and the last of the company's equipment vanished down the highway, Ayanna made one final pilgrimage. She climbed back to the place where rope burns had scarred her wrists, where rock dust had filled her lungs, where the sky had spun, and death had felt inevitable. The ledge had been stabilized and reinforced by the state's engineers. New warning signs dotted the trail. But in her mind, she could still see the raw cliff, the fraying rope, the endless drop. She knelt and laid a small bundle of wildflowers on the stone. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible against the wind. "For choosing me. For not letting go." The wind rose, rushing past her with a strange warmth despite the cold. In that current of air, she heard it faint but distinct: thump, thump, thump. Hoofbeats on rock. She closed her eyes and let the sound wash through her. It might have been memory. It might have been the echo of her own heartbeat. Or it might have been something older than language, speaking in the way mountains and rivers do. When she finally looked up, she saw him. Far above on the spine of the ridge, half shrouded in drifting mist, stood a dark shape, massive, motionless. Thunder Ash silhouetted against the pale sky, his head turned in her direction, mane rippling in the wind. For a heartbeat, they were still woman and guardian survivor, and legend both marked by this land. Then he turned away and walked into the fog. No thunder, no roar, no grand farewell. Just a silent retreat into the wild that had always been his. The air grew still again. Only the whisper of pine needles and the distant call of a hawk remained. Ayanna smiled through the sting in her eyes. Eagle's Spine had a protector. Her people had proof. The world had seen enough to know that some stories were more than myth. And Thunder Ash, whether spirit anomaly or something in between, would keep running these ridges long after headlines faded, long after court cases closed, long after everyone who thought they could own the mountains was gone. Because some legends aren't meant to be captured. They're meant to be believed. A year had passed since Colton Graves was taken away in handcuffs, and on the surface, Silver Hollow looked healed, reborn even. The wound the mountain carried had closed, but it had not forgotten the cut. The village had changed in quiet but beautiful ways. Ayanna's burned storage shed was rebuilt with the help of half the community. Children painted a mural of Eagle's Spine across one side, bright colors swirling into the shape of a mighty stallion. Visitors traveled from distant states just to stand at what locals now called the Miracle Cliff, where Thunder Ash had pulled a woman back from the jaws of death. School teachers wove the story into lessons about courage, stewardship, and the deep ties between land and people. And Ayanna, once hunted, dismissed, and nearly silenced, had become something entirely unexpected. She was now the representative of Silver Hollow in regional conservation councils. She spoke at conferences, universities, and tribal gatherings. Her voice carried weight. Her determination carried hope. No one saw her as a victim anymore. But late at night, when she walked home after council meetings, the mountain still spoke. Sometimes she felt the faintest throb under her feet, a low, steady pulse deep in the stone. Other nights, a vibration crept through her floorboards, soft as a heartbeat under layers of earth. Each time she paused, hand on the doorframe, listening. A year can heal a wound, Elder Marrow told her one evening, watching the sunset smear gold across Eagle Spine. But it cannot erase what cut it. And Ayanna began to understand that peace could be a surface, not a truth. Winter arrived heavier than expected. Snow piled against the cabin walls, burying fence posts and softening the sound of every footstep. But when spring came, it came unnaturally fast, too warm too soon. Meltwater streamed down the slopes at a pace no one had seen before. Surveyors from the state returned to evaluate long-term recovery. What they found wiped the brief smiles off their faces. The core stone drilled a year ago was still hollowed and brittle. Underground water channels had been diverted by blasting. Pressure pockets had formed beneath the upper ridge, like lungs filled too full. One engineer took Ayanna aside. His face was drawn tight. "The core layer is unstable," he told her. "If the thaw accelerates, this slope won't hold. It's not a matter of if, it's when." The words hollowed her chest. The nightmare of Graves's project wasn't over. It was merely delayed. Nature had not forgotten. And soon it would remember loudly. The first warm rain of spring fell on the last crusts of snow. That night, Ayanna awoke to a strange rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. Not hoofbeats. She knew the cadence of thunder ash as intimately as she knew her own breathing. This was slower, deeper. And it didn't move. It stayed rooted beneath her home, like a stone heart. She stepped outside barefoot on the cold wooden porch. Fog clung low along the ground. She crouched, pressed her palm to the soil, and closed her eyes. The vibration rolled through her hand. Her arm then climbed into her ribs. The earth beneath her pulsed with a heavy measured beat. The old women emerged onto their porches, drawn by instinct. One murmured into the night, "That is not hooves. That is stone shifting under memory." Ayanna's breath frosted in the air. The mountain was warning them. Again. At dawn, with the drumbeat still echoing faintly in their minds, Silver Hollow gathered in the longhouse. Arguments began before the fire was even lit. "We just rebuilt our lives," one man snapped. "We're not leaving again." "Something's wrong with the ridge," another said anxiously. "You felt it. We all felt it." "If the mountain is moving," an older woman said softly, "we must listen." But fear made people stubborn. "We defeated Graves," someone shouted. "Why isn't the mountain resting?" Ayanna stood. The room fell quiet in the way a room does when people expect a leader to speak. "Graves is gone," she said. "But what he did is still inside the mountain. The damage didn't end when the machine stopped. It's still changing the way this land breathes." Rowan nodded from the back of the hall. "She's right. We need continuous seismic monitoring and a clear evacuation plan. And the old water channels," Ayanna added. "We need to check if any natural outlets were blocked during the drilling." The village agreed reluctantly. Peace was cracking. Ayanna felt it. Eagle Spine felt it. Thunder Ash, wherever he was, surely felt it too. Meteorologists issued a rare alert. An unseasonably strong warm front was sweeping in from the southwest. Torrential rain was expected, rain that would fall on melting snow, sending torrents into the unstable ridge. By the night before the storm, the drumbeat grew louder. Cracks widened. A pine tree leaned so far that its roots were visible. Rowan arrived at Ayanna's home soaked from a scouting run. "If it goes," he said grimly, "it goes fast." Ayanna stared toward Eagle Spine. The mountain looked solid in the fading gray light, but she knew better. Mountains didn't have to collapse in one dramatic sweep. Sometimes they failed inch by inch, pressure rising, until the whole world shifted. She barely slept. Thunder rumbled in the distance, not from the sky, but from the earth. At sunrise, a booming crack shook the valley. Dogs barked, windows rattled, birds scattered. Then came the sound no one wanted to hear, a long, grinding roar. A section of the eastern ridge peeled downward in a slow, terrible slide. Soil, uprooted trees, and slabs of rock tumbled down in a wide tongue of destruction. It was heading toward the main road into Silver Hollow, the only easy evacuation route. Alarms blared. People raced to move elders and children to lower ground. Rowan directed teams to safer paths, while engineers scrambled to assess the slope. Ayanna ran uphill toward danger not away. She needed to understand the flow of the slide, the source of the pressure. When she reached a vantage point, she saw it clearly. A massive buildup of water, trapped behind a compacted layer of soil and debris soil, pushed there during the illegal drilling and subsequent collapse. Pressure was rising behind it, like a swelling artery. "If that doesn't release," she whispered, "the entire ridge will shear off." This was no longer just a slide. It was a ticking catastrophe. Chaos filled the valley, shouting, rushing water, the grinding of the moving earth. But above it all, a single familiar sound cut through the storm. Hoofbeats, heavy, powerful, relentless. Ayanna turned. Thunder ash crested the ridge, black against the gray sky mane, lashing in the wind. But he didn't rear or scream or charge into the landslide like a creature from legend. Instead, he ran along the fracture line, measured, controlled, precise. He paused at each widening crack, studying the earth beneath him. Then he followed its curve, tracing a long arc around the ridge, until he stopped at a mound of packed soil. Ayanna's breath caught. "He's not panicking," she said. "He's tracing the fault." Thunder Ash lowered his head and struck a single hoof on the ground where he stood. The earth there shifted, groaning under hidden water. And suddenly, Ayanna understood. That point on the slope where Thunder Ash stood, it wasn't random. That was where one of the mountain's old natural drainage channels had been years ago, before Graves's machines buried it under debris. It had once carried meltwater safely down into the valley. Without it, pressure had built to catastrophic levels. Ayanna cupped her hands around her mouth and shouted over the storm, "Clear this channel." "Right here, dig it out." Villagers and surveyors scrambled uphill, wielding shovels, pickaxes, anything they could carry. Mud sucked at their boots. Rain blinded them. The air tasted of wet stone and panic. Rowan reached her side. "Are you sure this is the spot Thunder Ash is?" she said simply. They dug. The storm hammered them. The ground shook so hard one man nearly fell. Behind Thunder Ash, a massive slab of rock began to separate, tilting dangerously toward him. "Move," Ayanna cried. "Thunder Ash, move, please." But he didn't. He held his ground like a keystone in a crumbling arch. The villagers dug faster, and then a gush of freezing water exploded upward as the buried channel broke open. It carved a new path down the slope, redirecting the pressure. The landslide shifted course, veering away from Silver Hollow. A swath of forest was destroyed, but the village itself remained untouched. When the roar faded and the ground finally stilled, the entire valley fell silent. One engineer exhaled shakily, wiping mud from his eyes. "If we were 10 minutes later," he whispered, "this entire valley would have been buried." He looked at the stallion, standing soaked but unshaken at the ridge edge. That horse knew exactly where the pressure point was. But to Ayanna, the explanation was simpler. Thunder Ash had listened. Not to magic, not to prophecy. To the mountain. After the storm passed and the danger subsided, the state team reviewed the seismic monitors scattered around the ridge. The data revealed a rhythmic, repeated pulse recorded hours before the landslide. Not random. Not man-made. Not hooves. Stone shifting under the weight of water and memory. Elder Marrow listened to the scientist's explanation, then smiled gently. He does not create the rhythm, she said. He hears it. Long before we do. Ayana stood beside the repaired channel, watching water pour through the newly reopened artery of the mountain. She closed her eyes briefly, feeling gratitude swell like a tide. Thunder Ash had not saved them with miracles. He had done it by listening to what people ignored, and that she realized was the deepest kind of guardianship. Thank you so much for watching and supporting our stories. Your time and encouragement mean the world to us. If you enjoyed this chapter and want to follow the journey ahead, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. More adventures are coming soon.